Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this important panel discussion on reproductive leave policies and practices and women career. I'm Dr. Mohan Prosenzadeh, and alongside with Professor Gail Morris, our academic dean for research at AIB, we are delighted to facilitate this panel discussion today. Today we have with us Mary Crooks and Sydney Colussi, Jessica Heron, and Terri MacDonald with us. Our panelists bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in a range of area, from academic point of view, law to health and public policy. While our panelists have already shared their insightful views on this important topic, we are excited to continue this conversation by focusing on menopause and menstrual leave policy and practices in Australia, and specifically we focus on challenges involved in this process. Now, without further delay, let's dive into our discussion with our panel of experts. I would like to actually start with Jessica. Because we have discussed from morning till now, and we are still, looking forward to see what would be the next step. So, what do you think from your expert knowledge about this one? What will it takes to get reproductive leave into the Fair Work Act and under the national employment standards, and how long do you think it might take?
It's a very good and hard question.
I'm sorry again. Just one more thing. If you feel like any of you, maybe I just ask Jessica, if you feel like you would like to contribute, feel free to continue.
So my opinion on time, because it can only be an opinion, family violence leave took 10 years. So if that's the metric, where it's unclear how far into this we are. I mean, if we say from today, then 10 years from today, but hearing from everyone today, people have been working on this for years. So who knows, we might be 7 years in already and we'll get it over the line in 2026. That would be ideal. But the way in which we make that happen is we need Parliament to table a bill. And so how you get Parliament to table a bill is you speak to government, you engage with government. And like Vicky was saying earlier, we've already got government on board now. We've got a federal Senate inquiry, which is really positive. If we continue to expand on that, then there's a very good chance that Labor might table a bill in the coming years if they maintain their power post-2025. That's certainly what I would like to see. And I'm sure everyone in this room would like to see at some point. But I don't know if anyone's got a different idea on when they think that might happen or how.
If I can, I think it's useful to note that the ACTU is now looking at this. And once the ACTU, if they decide to pursue that, in the same way that, it happened with family domestic violence leave, then those sort of things tend to build momentum and they start these conversations. Leaving that aside, trade unions like our own are already looking to implement them in agreements in these rounds and in future rounds of bargaining. And once we get that as a standard across the sector, then we can look at other sectors and say, well, look, this is what's been achieved here. You certainly can look at it in your areas too.
Great. I've got the next question. Mary, I'd like to ask this of you because we really wanted to get the practitioner perspective. So given all your extensive experience in public policy and advocacy for the advancement of women, so how do you see the role of organisations such as the Victorian Women's Trust in influencing and shaping of the policy and addressing the intersection of reproductive health and women's professional career?
Well, it's crucial to our role. Sadly, in a way, the Women's Trust is not rivalled elsewhere in the country. If I was given $1 for every time I was asked if there's a Women's Trust in New South Wales, we wouldn't need to fundraise. So the point is that there aren't a lot of really robust feminist advocacy organisations in this country. So you've just got to keep working hard on your core business. So I think, I guess the point about our work in the menstrual area, we weren't anticipating doing it. It was literally that 4 women who were fantastic menstrual educators came to us and said that they wanted to set up an accredited course for menstrual educators. And apparently I looked over the table and said, we can do more than that, surely. So that was 10 years ago. But we didn't anticipate working in this area. Once we did the survey, however, and got the lived experience coming through, it was a no-brainer. We just had to start taking action to break the taboo and so on. But I would say, just in relation to what Jessica said, creating the kind of change, social change and gender equality change, and any kind of progressive change, you have to stick at it. You just have to stick at it. It's not for the faint-hearted. And I think if I came back in another life as a dog, I would be a Jack Russell. Because I have one anyhow. But, if you give a Jack Russell a soft toy, they just, But seriously, you have to be steadfast. Jessica and I have talked about this today. When you have particular setbacks, you just have to keep on going. Aside from the menstrual work, I was just thinking before, it took us close to a decade with other women's advocacy organisations in Melbourne to get rid of the law of provocation of our statute books. So, it took until the 21st century to remove a law that said that a man was justified in killing his wife if she provoked him. But that took 10 years, and if you pulled up stops and said it's too hard, not a lot would get done.
Great. Would any other panel member like to?
Yeah, I think in terms of the relationship between law reform, which is what Jess is doing so much great work around, and also workplace policy, I think we really can't underrate the significant impact that employers and nonprofits have in really starting these conversations. I think, Mary, when you introduced your policy at the Victorian Women's Trust, that was about a year before we started our research at UCID, and just the nature of the media coverage changing over the past 5 to 6 years has been really notable, from, being quite dismissive and, what's this new feminist thing about? Why, sort of a culture wars topic, and now it's shifted to being a really significant government and employer policy issue. And I think that the role that, the private sector and non-profits or employers can play in really setting the tone for those conversations really can't be understated, in my opinion.
Can I throw in another? Sure. Is there a role for politicians, for us talking to our politicians in this space?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Strongly encourage.
Just as, we've got to take up that offer of making submissions to the Senate inquiry.
Yes,
it's really critical.
Fantastic opportunity.
But no, we should be talking to them wherever we can, and there's also a role for really robust male leadership here too. There's been some great examples around this country of men taking this up and actually taking the lead, which is very healthy.
Yeah, it's critical, isn't it? I'm glad you mentioned that, Mary, because I was actually really impressed to see the male representation that we have in the room, as well as all the experience that we're hearing from all the female sides. So I thought that was a really healthy balance, certainly in the physical space, and hopefully that's reflected virtually as well.
Yeah, thank you. Terri, you already gave us some idea, some backgrounds about your the NTU bargaining, negotiating enterprise bargaining, about these entitlements. So can you please share your insight on how to negotiate this entitlement with employers successfully?
Well, it's easy. Sadly, no. Look, when you are negotiating with an employer, you go with a range of clauses, and there's a great deal of give and take that goes on. We will have, a set of clauses that will be our mandatory, that we need to meet these points in order to consider coming to agreement. But there's also some flexibility around some of the other clauses. Like, we know that in a lot of situations, it's going to be a multi-step process. The enterprise bargaining structure isn't one that sort of like just happens and it's done. It's, a process over many years and many rounds of bargaining where you improve on rights and you tweak other clauses to make sure that, that was an unintended consequence, we better deal with that. And employers themselves too will have things that they'll want to address. So there is it's like any kind of negotiation, there will be some give and take. In relation to this, this wasn't a mandatory settlement point, for us in this round, but that has not stopped many of our branches from introducing, clauses and wanting to discuss it, because that's what our membership are asking us to do. And, like I said, we're a feminised industry. Of course, we're going to be listening to our members on this. So when we introduce these clauses, and there'll be varying, degrees of I guess quality in a sense of these clauses, but it's a process by which, you establish this, particular industrial right. You see how, it's accessed, what the problems are, where could it be improved. And in the next round of bargaining, you come back and you say, well, look, we think that this could be, better, better supported in, by tweaking this clause. Now, that's in terms of the industrial arrangements, in the collective bargaining sense. Then you've also got, and the question is was there a role for politicians? And absolutely, we would like to see improvements to the Fair Work Act. We would like to see, those workplaces which don't necessarily have collective agreements, or where the unions don't have a strong presence. We would like to see those workers be able to access these kind of kind of support for them around reproductive rights and reproductive leave. So in that sense, we do think that there should be a broader discussion around it. And that's the only way we're going to start reducing some of the stigma. I find it interesting that women potentially would rather talk about, mental health than menopause. So that's something I think we could, take
Can
on.
I just continue on the same topic? What are some of the common objections from employers that they raise?
So there's always, as we mentioned, concerns around cost and, the impact on budgets. And if you're a small business, for example, that will be something that would be, mentioned. We deal with large organisations, generally speaking, in our sector. So cost is a construct in some senses. How much does it cost for a VC to remodel their bathroom? We can have a discussion about that. But the other things too tend to be cultural. And women themselves are concerned about accessing these things in the same way as I mentioned with family and domestic violence leave. When you look at statistically the rate of, domestic and family violence in, our society, and then you look at how many people are accessing the leave, there's a huge difference. And a lot of people, women in particular, have said to us, well, I didn't want to access it because, it would then, label me. So there is that. We have to come to a point where we can have these discussions where there's not the stigma attached, and where women can regulate themselves, preferably, in the workplace, because generally speaking, that actually has a real, impact on productivity.
Anyone would like to add?
I think the cost issue is also, we have to bear in mind that businesses don't often talk publicly about the cost of staff turnover.
Yes.
So I think, rather than go straight to, the cost, well, yeah, but if you have better staff retention,
Yes.
It might well be that you're actually reducing your, because every staff person that leaves, people have to be retrained and trained and retrained, and so on. So the cost of staff turnover has to come into that as well if people are going to argue cost.
Any other points to add?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mary. I was going to sort of focus on that bit as well, the cost part, because maybe this cost is already getting incurred if people are perhaps making not the best informed decisions because they've got the brain fog. And I think the brain fog term is probably a bit more well understood because of COVID. If anyone's had COVID, there's a brain fog, and I think people understand what that means for people now. Yeah, so, the cost is probably already being incurred. And so it's not necessarily an additional cost at all.
But as I said this morning, with our data, very few of our staff have taken any more than 3 or 4 days a year. So they're not taking the 12.
Yeah.
So it's not 12 by 12 by 12 across the office at all. Yeah. So the take-up is actually not significant. I think it's more the psychological benefit of knowing the support's there.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic example that you're setting.
Yeah. And can you just, on the same point, so what are because you have already implemented this policy, so if anything is, for example, you would like to improve, what aspect of this model would you suggest?
If we took some time into the future, to be honest, we haven't reviewed our policy. We've just been doing it. And we've been running so many workshops with people, women in the tax department, women in Victorian public service. I mean, I've had workshops with women in Florida, for example, where in medical workplaces where they've got 80,000 female staff. So there's a lot of effort gone into that. But I would be inclined when we do review ours to actually take up what other people are now doing, which is broadening it out around other aspects of reproductive life. But we haven't got to that point yet. We just went straight for the menstrual cycle.
And I think that's important to acknowledge that there's other things that go with it. So in the union context, there's, flexible leave options. There's, a range of other things that go with that to support it.
Yeah.
I
can't underestimate the benefit of seeing women in our outfit being able to, because they've become more aware, they understand, they've become more widely read, and they actually look after themselves better. I have even looked after myself better in the last 10 years because of that. But the element of self-care, and I was talking to Helen this morning, Jess and I were sitting talking, we had a discussion with Helen, and really what Helen talked about was how important it is for women themselves to become more health literate. I mean, up until we did this research, and even looking over my past life, I realised that I went through puberty, I went into childbirth, I went into menopause, pretty ignorant, to be honest, for an educated person. If you had have asked me what was happening to my body in menopause, I would have said, don't know, don't care, it's just awful. So it is so central to a woman's psychological well-being and ability to feeling confident and dealing with issues, the really tough parts on the spectrum like endometriosis and so on. So the question of the menstrual cycle and menopause, perimenopause, is so integral to a woman's health. And so if you can start to address it in the workplace and make it a bit easier, and people themselves start to actually take up the issue of their own consciousness and own care. So that's going to have flow-on benefits beyond the workplace.
I've got something to add to that as well, Mary. It's an interesting thing that happened this year when Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk came out and gave support for additional leave days for reproductive reasons. A former Liberal senator clapped back really quickly via Sky News and said she said herself, I have endometriosis too. I've struggled my whole life. I don't want this leave. I'm not interested in it. But she then went on to say, what we need to do is get better health outcomes for women. And that's where we need to spend our time and our money. And I thought, this is the best debate ever. If we're on one hand, we can, sure, you don't have to agree on the workplace reform, but I love better health outcomes for women too. So if this is the political argument we're going to have, it's a win-win.
Yeah, very nicely said. Sydney, I had a question for you. I was wondering if you could sort of share with us your insights into the organisational challenges and opportunities that you've identified in the research regarding the creation of inclusive workplaces that effectively support women during the reproductive health transitions.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a lot of different issues we've come across. We touched on privacy today. That's huge. When you're developing this type of clause, or if management decides this is something we really want to do because we value gender equality and we want to hold ourselves out as a gender progressive organization, that's great. But unintended outing of what someone is going through is always a really serious concern. And you may have women in the workplace who are absolutely delighted to hear about this, and equally you might have people who are horrified and will not want to discuss or disclose those issues. And both positions need to be respected, I think, because, even though it's wonderful we're having these conversations, I think the status quo is still very much that these are taboo topics, and we are unfortunately probably in the minority, and it's, nothing's more private than your period or, a hot flush or a pregnancy loss. So there can't be a top-down expectation that you have to disclose. I think it's about not putting the onus on an individual to have to really put on a brave face and say, this is what I'm going through. It's about the employer's responsibility, and I would argue duty of care, to take on, the role of cultural change. And, this is I don't really have an answer in the sense of like what we do to actually protect against the risk of privacy infringements, but that just needs to be at the very front of our minds in policy development. Then in terms of other major issues that have come up, as it was touched on today, like when we think about menstrual leave, that's kind of an old policy in the sense that it's been documented for at least 100 years. But like I said earlier, the encouraging thing that's happening in this space is that employers really don't want a one-size-fits-all policy. And even though we don't have much empirical evaluation of these policies, that is something that I would personally find quite difficult to back up if it was just like a 1 day or 2 days per year thing for everyone. Having the flexibility to be like, okay, this specific person has requested this in this context and has just spoke to the different types of work. The needs of a train operator are going to be really distinct from the needs of a university researcher. And that's something that makes the legislative development of these policies a bit difficult. So I think that's why, of course, the Fair Work Act should absolutely be critiqued for its limitations, but also that's why there is a role for employers and unions to do that really targeted policy development that really engages with the workforce and what people are saying on the ground. And then I'll just say that also there's been an issue with inclusive language, and I think this was also mentioned earlier around pregnancy loss or family formation leave. Historically, these policies have almost uniformly always been designed for cisgender women and people in heterosexual partnerships. And I think that's often reflected in the framing of these policies. Obviously, these are gendered issues and a matter of gender equality. But, when it comes to bereavement leave for miscarriage, or when it comes to parental leave or IVF leave, being careful to make sure that the framing is very inclusive for people in all partnerships, birth and non-birth parents, those types of things. So I could go on, but I don't want to say,
It's a fantastic sort of summation there, and I can see we've got all the right skills and expertise in this panel to cover off on that. So you may want to add.
I think it's important that we don't focus on policy per se, but rather policy and action. The big question is about how to develop a positive menstrual culture within workplaces. And policy is part of that. So, and your point, Sydney, about not being top down, because people have to feel comfortable. People have to feel they can trust their management. They can trust peers. There might be people who do not want to go there, so they shouldn't be ostracised. So just as safety, psychological safety and respect and whatever should be a given in developing any work culture. That has to be what is created in order to start to work on the menstrual, menopause, reproductive front as well. No point shoving it into a workplace if people are really unconfident and scared and distrustful.
Yeah. Wonderful points. I just was aiming to ask a question in this area about especially if there is any kind of, if we propose this kind of entitlement, have you experienced any kind of discrimination claims, for example, from men's perspective or even from men in the, who doesn't have children or whatever in the workplace? Have you faced any kind of discrimination claims or any? No,
our workplace is tiny and it has a good culture. So it took root in a good culture. Mind you, I think, it's a bunch of young feminists, feisty feminists. I don't think that Wilfredo and Tarek would dare. But they have made it clear that they have really grown in their understanding and their appreciation of the issues within their own family relationships because of the work we've done.
Yeah.
But no, we haven't. There's been no backlash within our organisation.
So any kind of backlashes, if you are aware, if you have heard of any maybe examples, would you like to share?
I will just comment on that and say that historically in Australia specifically, there has been backlash against ideas like menstrual leave for concerns that perhaps it would violate the anti-discrimination laws of this country. Those concerns and that debate was happening around the time that Terri spoke to, when the Students' Representative Council was engaging with this issue and advocating for USID management. And the NTEU was advocating for USID management to honour this leave entitlement that had been in place. And one of the main arguments and pushbacks against it was, we're concerned that this is going to be a discrimination issue against men. And this is one of the fundamental, I'm not a discrimination lawyer, but this is something that comes up a lot in the sense that when you are in a discrimination law framework, can you have a male comparator for someone who isn't experiencing the same bodily function? So that similar challenges have come up around pregnancy. But this is pushback that will probably continue to happen. I believe in the UK there was similar pushback when it was proposed that menopause should be its own protected attribute. I'm not sure if that's a majority position. I think my own view is that public opinion is changing, and young men as well as young women are of the view that women shouldn't be disadvantaged due to, innate functions of their bodies. But there's probably always going to be a men's rights activist pushback in this space. So, I think that's just something you've got to push back again.
Yeah. So maybe my next question is from Jessica. As an employer, as an employment and industrial lawyer, how do you see the legal landscape evolving in support of these initiatives? And what challenges have you faced, in facilitating a national conversation on these topics?
Careful.
It's being recorded. We haven't proposed any kind of policy yet. That would be for the ACTU to do, and I'm sure they'll do that over time with their working group. So what we're more doing is looking at, what does it look like now? What could it look like? And just kind of playing with some ideas to see if this could exist. And we've landed on yes, it can, which I spoke about today. But in terms of, I did want to speak to the discrimination pushback point, because it is something that from a legal perspective, it will have to be considered. I don't see it initially as being a concern, because we're not taking the UK route there's no ask of making any of these reproductive issues we've talked about a protected attribute, so that would attract a discrimination argument. So we're kind of in the clear there. Touching the Fair Work Act is pretty straightforward in terms of adding in a new piece of legislation. It's not so much the law reform element is only the flexible work ask, because having reproductive leave in the NES is actually just straight new law, doesn't exist. So the flexible work issue, I think there will be some very carefully worded policy around how you insert reproductive reasons for flexible work. I'm not sure I don't know if the ACT have talked about it yet, but it will be a challenge because you're going to need to make it broad enough to capture everyone and all of the things that we've talked about today, but then not so broad that people could maybe take advantage of it, which is always what the naysayers on the other side are standing there telling you they're going to do. So it's going to be a hard task, but an achievable task.
So would you like to add?
I think the importance of allyship is crucial in all of this, either within your union or outside. Something, Jessica and I, we met over this issue a couple of years ago, and I think it's really important for you to make sure that you have run the issue through with people whose judgment you trust and who will have your back when you're forging ahead. So allyship is crucial, not just in the workplace.
Did you want to? Is there any potential? We've got a range of questions that we could still ask, but we thought we'd also perhaps put it out to the audience more broadly. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, Maha?
If you don't have any questions,
Yeah,
I have a list of questions that I can ask. Maybe we open the floor if you have any question and you would like to ask. Yes, Helen?
This would be for Jessica. Jessica, currently I work for a company that is mainly female, and we have a lot of flexible work arrangements in place following the Fair Work Act and the points that need to apply for that. Can I just ask about one of these points? You have to meet certain criteria to be able to put your request in writing to your employer. And one of them is, as long as you're 55 years of age and older, you're entitled to ask for flexible work arrangements. Is that a precursor? Is that a bit of a movement towards where we're heading here? A sly way of getting something in? Or is that just because we recognise we're getting tired by the time we're 55? Or is it something linked to superannuation in Australia?
I might palm this question off to Terri.
I was just thinking.
You would have more experience.
No, well, I was just thinking, it's an interesting policy. I can't say we've got anything like that. The problem is if it's age-related, and you could probably talk a bit more about that, but if it's age-related, a lot of what happens, that's, in one sense, I can understand where it's coming from. And I guess it might be even one of these pre-retirement type, transition to retirement type things, rather than looking at women's health per se. The reality is that, you have women who go through menopause way before 55, we've set up camp by the time we're 50 something. And, of course, there are a whole range of other issues. So I don't necessarily think that would be a way of inroads. It could, however, open up the conversation with the employer about the need to potentially have a different type of policy to address these other matters, because this one isn't going to be sufficient enough to take care of that. So I guess it all comes down to what the intent of the policy was and whether or not that's potentially going to be adequate.
Yeah, and example, so Maurice Blackburn has an enterprise agreement and we have a model flexible work clause. So anyone can apply for a flexible work arrangement, and it's between you and your manager to negotiate how it works. We've also got 4 health and wellbeing days, they're called. They're additional days. And so obviously the firm is pro this. But so what I've been saying to people when I talk about it, because everyone asks, do you have menstrual menopause leave? We don't. But with those two things, you can absolutely use them for all of the reasons we've discussed today. So I encourage people to make a flexible work arrangement if they have painful periods. I say use your health and wellbeing days if you're having bad menopause symptoms. And what the firm hopefully will do in the future is create a policy that actually says that and then disseminates that to everyone. Because again, with what Vicky was saying before, it's not so much about the leave and being able to get away from the office. It's having that safe culture where people actually understand what you're going through, and you can know in yourself, if you've got that policy in front of you and you're feeling poorly, oh, my work understands that I'm not on my own here. And I think just that in itself can be quite powerful, and that you don't need law reform for that. Any workplace can do it.
Yeah, it just reminded me. I mean, we don't have 4, but we have in our little workplace 2. You have a wellbeing day every 6 months, and if you don't take it, you lose it.
Yeah,
so if you haven't taken it by the end of June, that's that one gone.
Yeah.
So that's a way that you could start to quietly move in on the issue.
Do people just take health and wellbeing day, or do they need to declare what they're taking it for?
I just take them.
They just need
for a year.
They just need to email me or text me to say, I'm really keen to take a wellbeing day either this coming Thursday or next week. I'll text or email back saying, go for it. No reasons. They can go to the movie if they want.
Thank you.
Can I just ask why you would be looking at having it as a protected? Sorry,
question.
The term.
Yeah, protected attribute. It's a good question, and I've actually been thinking about this. Why we're not following the same approach as the UK? I don't know. It's not something that anyone is really discussing that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if you know.
I don't think we're at that point yet.
Yeah, so it's something to think about. It was unequivocally rejected in the UK, which is pretty disappointing for discrimination purposes, but they also had a conservative government. So at Sydney, have you looked into much on this point?
I think that the limitations of a discrimination framework are in the sense that I think a lot of lawyers might argue that menopause is adequately protected under existing sex and age discrimination statutes. That I think is very much open to argument, but that might be where some pushback comes from. Also, from like a gender and work perspective, the challenging thing with discrimination frameworks is that they really place the onus on the individual to advocate for their rights. And so the fact that Jess and Morris Blackburn are focusing on the Fair Work Act is really trying to attempt to put the onus on employers and organizations to make sure that their workplaces are functioning in such a way that do not economically penalize women for experiencing these issues. So, I think that there are very well documented cases of people experiencing direct employer discrimination related to menstruation and menopause at work. There was a New Zealand human rights based argument about this last year. She was criticized for taking sick leave for her period. There was a US coal operator. She filed a sex discrimination lawsuit because she was dismissed after experiencing bleeding onto an office chair. There are multiple cases of unfair dismissal documented in the UK. So I was like, this isn't to say that it's not a discrimination issue. I absolutely believe it is. But I think that there are unique challenges when you take a discrimination approach, which I think is probably reflected in, the Morris Blackburn angle, focusing on the Fair Work Act.
Do you think by being specific about it, so by using the terminology reproductive and menopause and leaving out maybe andropause, does leave us open to that kind of discrimination, and then perhaps having to have that disclosure in the future to be specific about the type of leave that is attached to that. So for instance, if we start allowing that kind of leave for someone for menopause, do we then open up that pathway for someone needing to disclose that, about 40%, anywhere from 12 to 40% of people will become diabetic around that age group at 50. that then there might need to be a disclosure around that particular health problem that a person has. And also maybe a cultural kind of discriminatory position for those who, for instance, some cultures experience menopause at the age of 47. Culture will have an earlier onset with some individuals. So do you think that it's better to have a broader terminology, and that also that includes andropause for men, because many men do experience some of the most significant symptoms that women do as well? Or should we be specific with menopause like we're speaking about today?
Our stance is that it's all inclusive.
Yeah.
So using the term reproductive absolutely covers andropause. Yeah, and that's.
And do you think that it should be reproductive specific, or do you think it should be, like you mentioned, the political comment that better health outcomes? Do you think it should be a life health, so it covers that umbrella where there will be other life health impacts?
It's a good question. It's come up it's come up a few times, and the issue is I can't land on another word. I've tried. Anyone else? Because it was menstrual and it was menopause, and then people were saying that's too, go broader, go reproductive. And then I recently was told, well, that just makes us all sound like baby makers. And I was like, okay, it does, but I don't, we kind of, unless we could come up with a better term to cover everything, it's the best we've got at the moment, I think. It's not, from a legal perspective, it's probably that's when it'll get refined. When the ACTU is working through it, they're going to have to deal with that problem.
It depends on what issue you're trying to resolve, and that's not to say that because you're dealing with reproductive concerns or issues, that there aren't other things such as, diabetic, diabetes management. But that's might be related in a sense that it happens at this particular age group and there are links, and you may need, to, if you're having symptoms because of, your menopause and, diabetes is now an added complication to all of that, then yes, of course it's all linked, but we have to understand what we're trying to address. And if it's reproductive leave and trying to keep people in the workforce longer and trying to keep workforces, more engaged and more productive, then, that's something we can deal with. We can deal with other things as well. It's not, an exclusion, but, we need to understand what it is what we're trying to solve.
And the disclosure around that. And then
so, as you saw with our model clause, and I should acknowledge the support and the advice we received on that, there was it was self-determining. We got around the issue of disclosure in the sense that, well, what is the level and what is, the impact on your work, your work capacity, and that in itself, should be able to, if you had a clause like that, then people would be able to determine what it is that, they need in terms to be able to get their work done, from very low, I just need 5 minutes or 10, 15 minutes to, get up, walk around, whatever it is I need to do, right through to, no, I actually have to take leave because I'm, not able to function. And that's self-determined.
Do you anticipate, I missed the morning because I wasn't able to be here, but do you anticipate a workplace workbook like they've got in Canada for menopause or anything like that?
Sorry, A?
Workplace, like an organizational tool, manual, workplace workbooks or anything like that?
So when you introduce any kind of new leave processes, there is education ideally that goes around that. What we like to see is union involvement in that education process. Certainly, having people trained in the workforce, having delegates in the workforce talking to staff members, about these leave provisions, educating the workforce about what's in their new agreement, and management working with us, or us working with management and getting that out. So that's where your human resources areas come into play, and where, your middle management, lower management all have to be part of that discussion as well. That's not an easy job. And as we've seen with other forms of leave, such as family domestic violence leave, it can actually fall apart a little bit at the seams. So that once you've got the entitlement, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to automatically access it. There's a process of education that has to go on, and that involves everybody, both the workers and the employers.
So I'm just a little bit concerned about time. So as we approach the end of this panel discussion, I want to express our gratitude to our panelists and all the guests presenting here, and also our online attendees. Just give me a second. For sharing their expertise and insight with us today. The issue we have discussed, of course, is a complex topic, and it's clear that there is much work needs to be done to create workplace that truly supports reproductive health and especially career advancement of women. But before we conclude, I just heard from my colleagues that we have one online question. Sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah, that's all right. So we have a very dedicated colleague who is joining us from France. And Christine has raised two questions. So first question, she said, in France, a few organizations adopted a menstrual leave. I was wondering if you have any experience to what extent women who take the menstrual leave are afraid of negative stigma, for example, discrimination. My second question, so I'll take the second question.
Yeah, maybe first, yeah. And by the way, Christine is one of the organizers of this event. So would you like to take the question?
That's a good one. It's an uptake question. So in terms of people that take the leave, do they feel discriminated against?
No, it's just not an issue. But again, we're a small outfit. It's just not an issue. It's just part of everybody's really relaxed about it and respectful and supportive of one another. They're more likely to say, well, maybe you need to think about getting a better menstrual cup. I've got a beauty. So no, it's not an issue.
Yeah. So I would just say that the research shows that issue is very much context dependent. So at the Victorian Women's Trust, you obviously have a group of highly informed and engaged feminist workers who are very much gender equality is front of mind. But, I think it's important not to dismiss overseas evidence that has shown that menstrual leave has been a source of employer discrimination. Again, this is highly context dependent, and a lot of the data is dated from the 80s and 90s. But for example, in Japan, which has had menstrual leave in place since the 1940s, which in that respect, it has been a fairly mainstream policy. There is documentation that employers have resisted this policy, that they have withheld bonus allowances from women who have utilized this policy. And it's been legislated since 1948, I think. Similar challenges have come up in Indonesia, where women factory workers have tried to take up their right to menstrual leave, and they are also, alienated for it. There are human rights concerns regarding providing proof of menstruation. Obviously, that is a fundamentally horrifying prospect. In that respect, I think the nature and culture of the workplace will very much shape how these policies will impact women, and that is why the education and accountability mechanisms are so important. So if there is any evidence to suggest that managers are penalizing women for taking these policies up, or are trying to create a culture where it is basically implied that you shouldn't be taking it, that's a concern. In that it's going to impede the intended effect. So I think that, not all, unfortunately, most workplaces are not like the Victorian Women's Trust. And I think that generally speaking, because this issue is still so taboo and stigmatized. Fortunately, that's changing compared to like when I was in high school and would never speak about this publicly. I'd be horrified by the idea of being up here. But, that is changing, but still I don't think that's the status quo yet. So I think that there really has to be strong accountability mechanisms in place to make sure that, nothing like that happens in this context.
Yeah, can you go for this?
So the second question is, to what extent this leave is really helping women going through this physical transition that may last from probably a few days to 1 year or even more? So my question is, how would it be implemented in organization? 2 to 3 day leave per year?
I mean, if I was legislating it, it'd be 2 to 3 days a month. Minimum. But I'm not a politician.
Yeah. We're falling on anywhere between 5 and 10, depending on the nature of the clause and those agreements where it's been embedded, and to what degree. I think that, it'll be managed like other forms of leave. The bigger concern, I think, will be about people actually accessing it. And utilising it when needed. Some people, as we've seen, it goes back to the previous question around discrimination. My concern is that people will self-regulate and prevent themselves from actually applying out of fear of what it might do to their careers and to the perceptions of them in the workplace, rather than employers actually, implementing any kind of negative. I think, there'll be that, that fear of actually, accessing it. That said, it's really important for some people to be able to do that. So
in case of the menopause, that's what she was talking about, not the menstrual leave, but menopause. So how much we are looking ahead for that leave. Is there specifically we are looking for that leave as well?
Well, in our situation, it's combined.
Yeah.
And it'll be up to the individual. But yeah, we'll let you know. Essentially.
Yeah. So before we conclude, I would like to give each panelist a moment for any closing remarks, if you would like to share.
When I spoke this morning, I mentioned our book About Bloody Time, and I wasn't sure that we had any copies left. But I've checked with my PA, and she's texted me to say there's 20 copies left. So if you want to get a copy for $30, you just go to the Women's Trust shop. So it would be great, if there are organisations where lots of people could read it within that organisation, it'd be great to pounce and get a copy. Because I really, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find the unpacking of the menstrual taboo, I think is done so well in that book. Apart from the first section, which goes from cradle to grave in terms of dealing with the cycle in a rigorous, non-medical way. So it's a hugely informative book. And then, in another year or so, you can read it in Italian.
Wonderful. So any other final points you would like to share?
I'm just grateful to you, Mahan, for organising this. I think this is the first all-day event on this topic I've seen so far. Is that right?
I think it might be.
So amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just also want to thank you, Arans, who actually sponsored this great event, and also AIB for their fabulous supports from all my colleagues, from oil team, from marketing, from faculty, from my all colleagues really helped me to make this happen. Definitely AIB executives, also everyone have been really supportive of this program, which helped me to make this happen. And thank you so much for just joining us. Thank you other speakers. Thank you everyone, and also the presenters and the attendees. Also those who joined online. That was a great session.